it's a tough road, but if anybody can do it, a Latina can do it. Like, I have no doubt. There will be a lot of haters. There will be a lot of rejection. There will be a lot of folks that are like envidiosas or like looking down on you and like trying to put you down. But all you got to do is pray to God, put your head down, and do the work.
All right. So, Cheryl, I am so excited to have you on Behind the Work. I think you have an amazing story, and I'm so excited to be able to share it with the people. And
Oh,
so,
thank
of course. And so, one thing I do at Behind the Work is that I ask people every single interview to tell me a little bit about the younger version of themselves. One
you.
thing that I really loved about your story from what I learned was that you told people that your mother never put you in a box. And so if you're not in a box as a child, I guess you're like running around wild and free. And so tell me about the younger version of you.
Yeah, in a way, right? I think my mom really trailblazed for my brother and I by coming to America in hopes for a better future. And to me, she always said that I could do anything I set my mind to, that if she could do it, I could do it, and that we just have to make the ancestors proud, right? And I think now being the first of my generation, my family, my lineage of women to actually have full autonomy of what I do in my life is both a true blessing and also a responsibility I don't take lightly. And so I wasn't really running around in New York City as much. I mean, like, I guess walking in the streets, like, counts. But my mom also never let me out of her sight because she was very much a tiger mom, and you gotta cuidar los hijos, like all the time. And so to me, it was more about using education as a way out of our financial situation and really allowing us to tap into our full potential. That I think was the way of not putting myself in a box. And so whether that's through like culture of what is expected as a woman, or whether it's what things are more respectable versus not. Like, even growing up, I loved acting, I loved the arts, and yet that was not seen as the way forward because you had to take a real job, a professional job, go and there's this joke that says if you're an immigrant child, you either become a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, or a disappointment. And so I was said disappointment now since I'm not any of those. And so, but at the same time, if we're limitless, if we're just in this world doing one thing and trying to do it well, I might as well go all out with what I love. And so, so young Cheryl was happy, was always was very competitive. I was always competing with my brother, who's older. She also just had a lot of dreams and always, like, I wanted to be first lady, president, and the ballerina at the same time, right? I think you can hold both truths and be creative and analytical and live your full life. And so I feel like my 30s is my way of kind of coming back to that. And so currently now, as a VC, nonprofit CEO, and an actress, I feel like I'm finally living that truth.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure that you are far from a disappointment. Like,
you gotta ask my mom, bring her next, because
like, hey mom, are you proud of Cheryl?
she'd be like, who? What?
That's funny. Well, I think the theme about education really is loud in your life, right? Like, you didn't just go get an education, girl. You went and got a full scholarship from Harvard, And I think one thing about your story that really resonates with me is that, sure, you got to Harvard and you would assume that a full scholarship is enough, but you've cited on multiple occasions that you were working 3 jobs to also cover your living expenses while you are are at Harvard, right? And so I remember even my own story. I got a full tuition scholarship, but I still had a lot of expenses as a student. And so I would love for you to share a little bit about what those years were like for you being at an elite institution where I imagine there was a number of students that come from very privileged backgrounds that didn't have to navigate 3 jobs, and you navigating, having to get your education, but also the financial pressure with having to also kind of figure out how you were going to live while being on campus.
No, absolutely. And I mean, once again, I was very fortunate in the sense that my brother was a senior when I was a freshman. And so I had his mentorship. He actually hooked me up with my first 2 jobs, which was being in the library and then being at the Harvard store as a clerk. And that's a blessing in itself, right? In a way, just having those connects and people that can vouch for you goes a long way when you're trying to get a job, or when, you're trying to figure out what's the best job to get. And so, the library, I was working at the same time as being there, or the Harvard store. I was able to sometimes take calls, or, just when it's a late night, right? So you're able to get the shifts that are, more flexible. And so, that was super helpful to have his support. However, I also realized that there were some more like ambassadorships, or like things that you could kind of do virtually that also paid. And so I was able to do that too. Which to me, I mean, on one hand, it sucks to have to do 3 jobs and like balance all of that alongside a tough course load, and also extracurriculars and leadership opportunities and social life and love life, and learning about yourself, right? That's super overwhelming, especially when you're like doing it at the highest levels. But at the same time, it made me learn how to juggle everything, and realize that you could do things virtually and you can balance things well. So in some ways, that's also why I didn't put limits on myself of how much I could do, as long as I, still had my sanity and that I, still felt like everything was adding to my life. And yeah, I mean, money is real. A lot of these institutions are all about who you know and how they can help you later on in the future. And I'm not dismissing that. I think that's really important, especially now with AI and everything. Like, networks are even more valuable in a way. But I leaned on my community. I leaned on these jobs just to make it happen. If you're gonna find a way, you can't let the shot go to waste. You have to really make the most out of it. And so do whatever you can to get the money to go to the galas and the balls and the strips and all of that, to get to the final clubs and to do all the things that you need to make the most out of it. Like, I didn't let money be the factor for them. And also I had to support my mom along the way. So I always needed to do that, and I still do. And so it just kind of prepped me for that early on.
Yeah, for sure. I love how you're framing this as like, sure, it was hard work, but it also was preparation for the things that you're doing now, which I imagine are even harder. And we'll go into we'll go into that a little bit later on. But one thing about you obviously, you finished your degree at Harvard, graduated cum laude with honors in economics, and then ultimately found your way into Barclays in their finance department, right? Tell me a little bit about what drew you to finance, because I can see the correlation between like finance and like what you're doing now. And so tell me about like what those years at Barclays kind of taught you about money and how capital actually moves through our society.
No, absolutely. I mean, I did economics, quite frankly, because I knew that I had to support my mom after graduation, and my brother was going to become a doctor. So he was going to be in debt for forever, and still is, but soon he will be out of it. And so I needed a high paying job. Like, that was just the reality. And so investment banking is one of like the most competitive things, especially at Harvard, because everyone wants to do it alongside consulting. And so actually my junior summer, I recruited for both, which was crazy work. Like, that's when my sanity went out of the room, went out completely. So that was, it was just because I wanted to learn how money moves and also to make money myself. That was the driving force. And because of that, actually, because of that job, I was able to put a down payment on a house so that my mom and I would never, have housing instability again. And so that was also main drivers to have security from the get-go. But what I learned being in banking is um, we are so oblivious sometimes to just the sheer amounts of money that get transferred every day, like in the trillions, quadrillions of dollars. I was the lead analyst of a $2.5 billion securitization for Yum Brands, which own Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, KFC. And just doing that deal and seeing like the actual cash flows behind it and like being deep in the numbers, I was like, whoa, like these are like, yes, there are numbers, but there's also real people behind us. There are stores, there are like all these different things that we just never even think about when we're just moving around the world. And also how money is concentrated. There's only a few like uh, main banks and institutions that are a part of it. And so on one hand, you could either see that as cynical and like, oh God, like what can we do to change this? Because it's only in hands of a few people. Or you can say, hey, well, let's create institutions or let's be part of institutions that are actually changing this. And so that's kind of my driving force for how to do things today. I mean, I'm grateful that I worked in big institutions because they also see like, professionalism, like how to navigate the workplace. What does the work ethic is crazy in banking. You're pulling 80 to 100-hour weeks. And I mean, I I gained like 40 pounds. I broke out in acne. I was sleeping under my desk sometimes. Like you really get to see what like devoting your life and selling your soul for a good price looks like. And if anything, it helped me then for my next step, which was going to tech, where banking, private equity, and then tech, but how I took that work ethic and applied it to a place where people only work 50 to 70 hours a week, and I could outwork anybody. So in a way, it was very positive to have that experience.
Yeah, for sure. I think that so when I started my career in corporate, I would definitely say it probably was very helpful for me to get that experience before I became a founder because it helped refine a lot of my own business practices or even the ways in which I institutionalize like work culture at my own organization. And I think that's such a underrated topic. A lot of people are like, no, like quit, forget corporate, but you get so many experiences from there that you actually have as transferable skills when you are building something from scratch. So I'm happy that you mentioned that. So in the midst of all of this, you are working investment banking. You're saying that you're sleeping under your desk some days, but you also found a way, some way, somehow, to start a career in modeling. And from what I understand, you've worked with Tom Ford and Christian Louboutin and Kohan. And when you think about the word investment banker and runway model, they don't always go hand in hand, right? Tell me a little bit about how you were holding both of those identities and why you refused to choose. Because after work with brands like this, you could just be like, all right, buy investment banking. But you were like, you know what? I'm going to double down on both.
Yes. It was it was I feel like it was something I had to do because my mom actually, right as I started in banking, got diagnosed with thyroid cancer. She's a survivor though, so we good. But in a way, it made me accelerate all the things that I wanted to do, right? So I bought the house. I was driving in banking, and then I also always wanted to explore modeling. And I'm 5'10", like people you have told me in the past you can model. And so I was like, you know what? Let me just go to an open call for an agency and just see what happens. And so they were like, we really like you, but like, do you have a book? And I was like, what's a book? Like, they were like, it's different pictures to see your range, blah, blah. And so it took me like a year to compile said book, but I did it. And then I came back and then they signed me. Right. And this all happened because of a lunch break, because they were like only a couple blocks away from my office in Times Square. A lot of the modeling agencies are in Midtown. And so And it's one of the biggest agencies out there, which is state, that it's in New York. They have, it's just an incredible, it was an incredible opportunity. And so, yeah, I accommodated it through like weekends or through my few sick days that I would have, right? Like barely, like it was tough to really get out of things. But that continued through private equity. I ended up doing the New York City Marathon to lose all that weight I gained in New York, sorry, in investment banking. And then finally going to tech, I was starting to book even more. Like I had booked Givenchy, and then the pandemic hit. So
Mhm.
that in a way, I was like, maybe if this really works, I could actually focus. And then the pandemic hit, and they had to cancel that shoot. I had booked a couple of commercials as well. They had to cancel those where I was lead, right? Like it was just so many things where all of that hard work was finally starting to culminate into something. And then the pandemic hit, and I was like, wow, like in some ways it reminds me, you can't put your eggs in one basket. You have to be doing multiple things. And then it was during the pandemic that I ended up doing like a couple of small like extra things just to be on set, thinking about acting, all of that. And then later I pulled the trigger for that. So just because a door closes doesn't mean that you can't open another one. And so I feel like every time that does happen to me or things change, like I always like, let's multiply this into so many other things.
Mhm.
That's the mindset I have. And yes, an investment banker and runway model doesn't go hand in hand per se, but people have done it in the past. There was a girl at Morgan
Mhm.
Stanley that went to America's Next Top Model, right? She
Oh,
ended up getting fired, unfortunately,
oh
which
no.
it's one of those things that I was in an era where you couldn't bring your full self to work. So
Mm.
that, and those were kind of the cautionary tales that I would hear, and like, um, and it was frustrating, but I'm glad that I'm now in a position where I can say I do two things at once. People always say like, oh, you're not focused, you're not disciplined, blah, blah. But in a way, it has worked because now we're in a society where you can do remote work, where you can actually like be seen in a positive light for being a serial maverick, right? And so that to me is partially a culture change, and then also just some personal bets I made that paid off.
Yeah. I'm actually happy that you talked about this with my friend and I the other day. We were talking about the importance of having a portfolio life because you do put all your eggs in one basket. And then when things hit the fan, you have nothing to fall back on. And so while a lot of these institutions, they want loyalty and they only want you to be committed to them, when it all comes down to the bottom line, like I can be very disposable to you. And so what am I left with at the end of the day? Right. And so I'm happy that you touched on that. You also touched on, the idea of like opening doors for yourself, but I also think there's a theme about your career and your story where you're also about opening doors for others. And I remember when I was reading your background, you talked a little bit about your time at Republic and you being employee number 10 at that company. And I remember when Republic came out, I remember I was in New York City. I was like, this is actually pretty cool. Like this company is really democratizing the ways in which folks can invest in up and coming, really cool up and coming startups. And so I'd love for you to talk to me about those years and how you saw some of these themes around like opening doors for others in your time while being at this startup.
Absolutely. So, as we talked about banking and private equity, like I definitely saw how these were kept networks, and these were industries where only a few could participate. And so I actually joined Republic because I had gone to one of their events where one of my mentors was leading it, and I was able to see firsthand how they were going to democratize. And then I met the founder, Ken, and I just was like, oh my God, like this man is even crazier than I am. And like he's going to make it work. So I will follow him.
Mm,
Right. And so uh, to this day, that's how also I invest. If I see the founder being like so adamant about what they're building, like it's very clear that they will run off a cliff to make this happen. And so I needed to follow this man. So I got hired, and essentially took that work ethic from banking, applied it to tech, and I was able to move up really fast. But more specifically, it was that motivation to open doors for others, and that there's a multiplier effect when you build communities where you can actually help do that. So it's not just on you. I don't really like it when people are like the gatekeepers or like the I am the kingmaker or queenmaker, whatever it is we want to call it, because that to me, once again, becomes more of a scarcity mindset than more of an abundance mindset.
Mhm.
And that is sometimes a sign of a degeneration, because there used to be only be like one person in the room or whatever. And then now we're in a different area where it could be multiple. And we should be thinking about not just bringing people to the table, but expanding the table, making our own tables, and actually being powerful together. So Republic had that promise, and I was just an evangelist that truly believed in it, and that also then led to me creating LaFamilia, which is all about community for Latinos in venture and entrepreneurship. And I think that's the beautiful learning that I took from Republic, is that the community can do so much more. And yeah, talking about like the multiple jobs, there was a moment during the pandemic where, I had spoken at 70 events in 1 year because it's all remote. I ended up blowing up on Twitter. And then my 3 or 4 jobs that I had was, I was at Republic as head of venture. I was a Lightspeed scout, which Lightspeed is one of the biggest venture firms in the world. I was an investment partner at the community fund, which became Next Wave, which is a New York City AI investor. And then I created LaFamilia. So I had 4 jobs at one point, and that led to a lot of burnout. So I was very much that's actually partially why I ended up going to GSB, was because I just needed a break, and so B school was my way out. But once again, community has just been at the forefront of everything I've done, and Republic is in a way the first time that I was able to build those muscles to create it.
Mm-hmm. And for those listeners that don't know what Republic is, like, what is Republic?
Yes. So Republic is essentially a platform that allows folks to invest in startups. And it's changed now significantly, where now it's also embraced a lot of crypto. So you're able to actually create your own token sales there, and also be part of different rounds for larger companies. And so really, really proud of the team out there that has taken us to unicorn level. And yeah, republic.com.
Mm-hmm. And so then for those that are listening too, you also spent time at Republic building out their venture partner program. Like, why was that an important program to actually build while you were there? I don't think people realize that venture partner programs, they're really cool, right? I think that's one. And I think two, it is also, again, democratizing the ways in which people can get into the world of VC. So for those who are listening that want to know more about that, what was it, and what did you learn about creating that program?
Yeah, no, I think unfortunately it doesn't exist anymore. I think it was more of a sign of the times, but it was because of George Floyd and the whole movement towards more diversity in the space, which rightfully so needed to happen. The stats are grim. Actually, they have become even more grim, unfortunately. But by having a real concerted effort, you can still make change. And so the Republic Venture Partner Program was a way for us to bring those that are in the space that deeply believe in what we're doing, and also want to support more underrepresented founders, where they essentially become nodes. And then as they find founders that want to raise through us, they would be able to connect us, and they would have white glove service because they were they were recommended by a venture partner. And so once again, it's that level of community building where you want to bring the best people who truly authentically care, versus those that are just doing it for the brand name, or just for fun. And so and yeah, but we also then created a full stack ecosystem where partners were at the top, those that were more senior, and then venture associates and venture fellows. So venture fellows were more people who like wanted to break into the space and like could start, getting their chops in. And so that was really exciting, because that meant that you could rise up within Republic in a way, that felt organic, that we kept prepping you and making you the best that you could be in this space. And so it was really, really big at one point. I think it had like over 600 people involved that we were talking to like almost every day. Like it was a really active Slack. I mean, but that being said, that was all pandemic. Going into post-pandemic, less people were on Slack and people were more in real life. And that's actually in some ways now how community is being built. Everyone wants to be offline. And so it was a beautiful program. I'm really proud of it. I was able to hire a full team to support it as well. And we did so many amazing activations and things to support their professional growth. And some of them have ended up raising funds together, hiring each other, sourcing and investing together. And those are things that like even now, almost 8 years later, people still come up to me and say thank you for this program because it helped me do what I wanted to do. And so that's been a blessing.
Yeah, for sure. And so you spent about 3 years at Republic. You built out this really phenomenal program. And then you're like, you know what? I'm going to start my own kind of thing, right? And so for the last couple of years, you've been building La Familia, which is the largest global community of verified Latine venture investors. Tell me about that moment. What gap were you seeing and what were you feeling that made you say, I have to build this right now?
Absolutely. So I was lonely during the pandemic and I wanted to find more Latinos like me that were in this space. And every time I asked my friends where the other Latinos were at, they were like, it's just you. And I was like, that doesn't make sense. So I ended up going on LinkedIn, starting to find people with like the last name Gutierrez or Hernandez and being like, hey, like, are you Latino? Like, I would love to be your friend. And we ended up finding 6. And then we were like, cool, let's just start a community called VCFamilia. And that's how we started. Now VCFamilia is 600 Latino investors strong, which is exciting. Mm-hmm. And then founders wanted the same community. And so we built Founder Familia, which is now also about 600 Latino venture-backed founders. And then we recently just started Angel Familia, which is for Latino angels. So if people are interested in learning how to angel invest, that's the way to do it. So I'll also say that it came from a place of need, this pain point I had, but ended up becoming a movement, right? Where, we're creating an inclusive and supportive environment for Latinos who are founders or funders can thrive. And, we do it through education, community, access to capital, in a way that's also authentic and with the commitment to excellence and gate breaking, right? That's, I think, the most beautiful part of all of this is I took all the things that I liked and didn't like from my past experiences, and I applied it to something that I think is the future, which is essentially a good culture where we're all supporting each other, that, we lift as we climb. And that's like ingrained in the organization. So also say that I'm so proud of what we've already done because the impact has been massive. We've helped fund managers raise their funds. We have helped founders close out their round. We have helped, folks hire each other and create funds together. And that to me is so beautiful because I know for a fact that there's a lot of them that wouldn't have been able to do that otherwise, right? We gave out operational capital grants to emerging fund managers, $25K each, to help them with admin, legal, hiring. We've given out grand prizes of $25K, $50K to founders to support them in their growth. That's non-dilutive. And right now we're building Familia Fund, which is going to be the first of its kind philanthropic fund that actually can invest in for-profit ventures. And so that's going to be really exciting because we're creating also a new instrument that helps founders buy back their equity. And it's just really cool because once again, we're not just nonprofit, but we're pioneering as a nonprofit, which makes the work really exciting, but also a whole new ecosystem infrastructure that allows for this generation to back the next generation in a way that I think is so, I think more community organizations should operate in.
Yeah, for sure. I really love the focus on the Latina community. The numbers don't lie. Latina-owned businesses generate over $2.7 trillion in US economic output. And yet Latino founders, they're only getting about 2% of venture capital. And
Oh,
this
it's
is
now worse, by the way. The LBAN report that just came out, it now says 0.6% of VC has gone to Latina founders, right? It's less than 1%, which
less
actually
than
tracks.
1% is crazy. Less than 1% is crazy. And I
Mhm.
always say to people, like, I don't think there's anything that is separating our businesses from anyone else's businesses. And I also just don't believe that it's that we're not qualified to receive those dollars. I just believe that there are real systems in place that are stopping us from being able to build the same ways as other communities build. And so I am curious, right? When you think about those numbers and you say them out loud, like, what do you want folks that hold the dollars to know about why this is a problem and understand what it means to want to build things and then not be able to do so because you're capital constrained?
Yeah, so I think this is why the approach that we've taken at LaFamilia is so important, because you have to think about this in terms of systems, right? And Founder Familia is there to support each other as they climb, as they build their companies, and to support each other to not make the same mistakes, right? So that they can also pasar la voz when they're talking to investors and saying like, oh, this is a good investor, this is a bad investor, because there's also a lot of bad actors out there. So that's why Founder Familia is so important as a community. VCFamilia have their own issues around like they're trying to climb up the ladder or they're building their own funds themselves. So in a way, they are founders too. It's just that they're building firms. And so by putting them all on this umbrella, we're basically showing that like even though you're different sides of the table, you're still dealing with similar issues, and that you should see the commonalities and the shared interests that and the shared experiences that bond you, right? And so if you just go to any investor and just say like, well, we do this and we do that, like people have been preaching that for years and nothing has changed. And so what we have to do is actually think about it from a systems perspective. How are we making sure that we're generating serendipity in a way that we're bringing them together into different events or different galas or different opportunities like peer groups, so that then they could start building those trusted bonds. Like there's psychological studies that show that if you meet somebody in 3 different environments, you actually build deeper bonds because you show that they're serious, that they're not just a warrior or like just out here like skedaddling, right? They're actually investing in their businesses. They're actually excited to support the community. They're like really showing up. And so that's why, you do business with each other, you get business for each other, you like are really elevating as you climb. And so I think that's the biggest part of all of this, is by making sure that people feel like they can be authentic and vulnerable and authentic in this space, because that's how you build the deeper bonds. And then that's how you're able to then have more money flowing, because people are going to be supporting their networks and, their friends and like other folks that, in the environment that's so risky, you want to de-risk as much as possible. And so we kind of do that by having this infrastructure in place.
Absolutely. And I love that it's really power to the people. Like that's what La Familia feels like. It's like rather than waiting for the system to be built for us, we're gonna just build the system on our own and hope that it helps to solve the problem. And so when you think about the venture capital space in general, a lot of folks talk about pattern recognition and how they're looking for certain things, whether it's a pedigree or you have had to graduate from this kind of school in order to make an investor feel safe, right? Knowing that many of us, we don't get to graduate from Ivy League universities, but it doesn't mean that we're not talented. And a lot of people will also say that there hasn't been too many proof points where there have been Latina founders that have had massive exits to make them feel comfortable either. Like, what do you say to them about it betting on outliers, that they might not necessarily fit a certain mold, but that doesn't mean they can't get there?
Absolutely. I mean, it's so interesting putting it in this perspective right now, where in 2026, AI has decreased the cost of tooling by like 90%. And so now more than ever, folks that are maybe domain experts or that are side hustlers can actually do this and build something on the side where they don't need venture capital. So in a way, VC is starting to become a little risky itself, right? And there's a lot of people I know, and also VCFamilia's membership is decreasing in a way because there's not as many that are in there anyway, because they want to become founders, because it's an exciting time to become a founder. But it just is so interesting because now the things that you thought would save you, like pedigree, do not. And I think now VCs are trying to get even more, once again, they're starting to gravitate towards their friends and even more towards what's safe to them, while everything is shaking below their feet. And so that to me is a sign that there is power being transferred from VC to founders, and that will only make VC even more tenuous to like not invest in folks. But that's actually where we see the potential, which is why we're raising a fund, because we want to invest in those that are being overlooked by VC, and that could actually then create the unicorns and use our money as working capital and also retain their equity, right? Like I think there's a better way to create something like this, where then it once they return the capital, it goes to the next founder and it becomes sort of an endowment model. I think there will be more of those out there that exist because of this transfer of power, and because founders want capital that works for them instead of having to be on the other side that like is always just trying to get a shot. Like there's so much time and effort that's wasted doing that. Whereas now founders are more picky, and VCs need to come with more than a check.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I believe that especially now with the use of artificial intelligence, like there are so many ways to build something from scratch that doesn't require you to have venture capital from the beginning. And granted, as someone who's running a business, I know how early on it was really, really necessary for me to get certain injections of capital to take me to the next level. But this was like circa 2014, right? Like the systems have changed dramatically right now. And I think a lot about this idea of us as founders being picky about where we get dollars. I think a lot of times it often feels like, oh, we're at the mercy of these investors, right? And I always tell people, guys, I don't know, but I did a lot with $500. I did a lot with $10,000, right? And it doesn't always have to be that we're at their mercy, right? It can also be that like we can get creative about the ways in which we build our businesses. And so thinking about ourselves as a place of like thinking about ourselves from a place of abundance and speaking power into us, I believe is like the best ways in which we can become stronger founders, because it lets us lead with our value and not necessarily from this place of like scarcity. So I'm really happy that you mentioned that.
No, absolutely. And just to echo what you said around of knowing the value of a dollar. I feel like Latinos also we really stretch everything, and we know exactly what to do, which is also why I think, because we have that mentality, you will be even more disciplined when it comes to AI on building their businesses, so that they'll be even more cash efficient, which means they're even more attractive, and there's so much more you can do there. So it's just to your point.
Mm-hmm. And so, for the Latina founders that are building businesses right now, and they might feel a little icky when you say stuff like AI, I always say, like, you can't feel icky about this right now, because a lot of folks need you to be this way in order to create the case for how they can support you. And I had a guest recently. Her name is Mickey Reynolds. She's my really good friend from Slauson and Co.
She's a Republic venture partner.
She is fantastic. And one of the things she said in her interview was like, you got to incorporate some kind of AI into whatever it is that you're building. And so if Latino founders, the Latina founders are listening to this interview today, what would be your words of encouragement to them about needing to use these kinds of tools?
One, I partially think that Latinos are actually adopting it faster, because I think we have seen these types of disruptions growing up. And also, it's part of the Alabama report. Like a lot of Latino businesses actually even incorporate more tech than people think. And so it feels like they are curious and they really want to see how they can cut costs or how they can make themselves 10 agents to kind of help out with what they're doing. There is that trepidation of like, will this replace me, or will, is this good or bad for the for society as a whole, which are questions that I don't think we can answer. But I will say that a lot of founders that embrace AI sooner rather than later will find it easier to build with time. And if we can do that, and if we can make sure that Latinos are on the early adopter side, that will actually generate a lot more economic power. I think right now for Latinos, we have a lot of cultural power, like with Bad Bunny and Shakira, and lots of people are excited about our culture, but then it doesn't really translate to economic power. So in some ways, Latino founders need to have a responsibility of themselves. Hey, we are the ones building that future where we translate this power into generational wealth. And if you want to make money, if you want to build something that lasts, embrace AI for what it is, because everyone else already is, and otherwise you'll be left behind. And I think if you do, you'll find that there will be a lot of rewards to that, and making sure that it just aligns with the values of what AI you want to use and how you use it in a way that makes sense to you.
For sure. And so I know we spent some time talking about the founder side to this. I'd love for us to shift gears to talk about the VC side to this, right? Because I don't believe there are a massive amount of like Latina identified investors, right, in the world in comparison to our peers, right? Tell me a little bit about what you've been learning from VCFamilia about what makes Latina investors different, exciting, what kind of perspectives are we coming to the table with, and how are they leaning on each other to build an ecosystem for each other?
Absolutely. So, being a Latina investor, I've seen firsthand how people, if they find shared commonalities, they're actually going to do business with each other, share deals, like, invite each other to different opportunities. And that to me is so important, because once again, that's how you build that trust and sense of belonging, and also allow folks to last in this industry, because it could get very lonely very quickly. So the fact that there's 600 Latino investors across the world sounds like a lot, because most people don't expect there to be that many, but in the grand scheme of VC, it is not that much, right? And so that's in some ways why when people find each other, it's like, oh wow, like somebody else, and there's a positive goodwill that happens there. I just think that there is a bit of a generational shift, where there are a lot of the VCs that were the first ones that they knew of that were in this space, and then kind of had a crabs in a barrel mentality of like there can only be one. But then with VCFamilia, we in a way were like, let's continue and let's make the table bigger and let's bring each other in. And so I have seen and helped with placing, junior Latinos with senior Latinos as mentors or their jobs, right? And so they get to like really support each other as they climb. And that to me has been so rewarding, because that has changed their lives. And from there, if you look at our 2025 impact report, you'll see that 79% of Latino investors have invested in Latino founder, which, by the way, does not include LATAM investors. It just includes US, right? Which is a huge number. 0.6% of all VC, 79% of Latino founders, which also makes the case that we need more Latino investors so that they can be cutting checks, right? And I think that's even more important to stress, is that this problem is two-sided. Like, it's just, you need more founders and you need more investors, and you need each other.
For sure. And so when Latina VCs right now are building up their firms, right, are you finding that they are citing the same kind of challenges when they're trying to get to a certain like number that they want to close on?
When we did the Ansar program, where we gave the operational capital grants, we actually did a couple of data studies on this, right? And one of them is the fact that a lot of Latino founders a lot of Latino investors building their first time funds, they actually raise at like 1/4 the amount that other people do. I think the amount was like 27 million, and usually on average people raise like 80 or 90 100 million, right? And so like it just feels like there's a gap of like how much they think they can raise versus how much, you know, other folks want to raise. So that's number one. And then number two, when we actually polled all the people that applied, people said that they have a hard time because once again the market doesn't see them as founders, and they don't get much support for the admin, legal, and hiring that they need to even stay competitive. And so I'll give an example of someone that ended up winning, where they ended up moving from Mexico to San Francisco to finish raising their fund. And because of that geographic change, they were able to raise from mega funds, and they were able to double their fund size, which I think is so important because once again, they're not coming now from a place of scarcity, but a place of abundance. And just even giving, by the way, this is 25K. This is not even like in the grants, like huge, but this is enough for somebody to make it to the next, to cross the chasm and make it to the next level, right? And so that to me is once again a sign of we just got more money and more resources to support this community. We can do so much more, and yet with this current environment, it's been really tough.
Yeah, for sure. And so if there were the powers that be were listening to this, right? And they were like, you know what? I want to make this less tough. What do you think they need to be doing to make this less tough? Because one thing I have found in my own conversations with people is like everyone wants to help, but no one knows how to help. And they think that like throwing money at the problem will solve it, or they think that sometimes the mentorship and training will solve it. And I'm just like, you got to get more clearly defined about the ways you can contribute sometimes. And so, if I was someone who had all the power in the world to change the circumstances for Latina VCs and Latina founders, what would you say they can do to help us?
It would be a multifaceted approach in my mind. First of all, we do need capacity building money, and to really not just build up the staff and kind of how we operate in our programming, but then also to give out grants to those that are actually boots on the ground, right? So that's number one. That would be the biggest impact from the get-go. Then it's more about like giving back in terms of your wisdom and your know-how and the networks and access that you're already a part of, right? Like I've seen what the gilded halls of Harvard and Stanford provide, and I know there are so many doors that you don't even know exist that are out there. And so like, you know, making sure that you're pasando la voz to the next generation also really helps. So whether that's through mentorship, that is through training, that is through being part of these programs, it just is so important. And then last but not least is just showing up and being available. I feel like, especially when you're like in billionaire status, like everybody wants a piece of you, which is fair. It's fair. But I think if you actually have this dedication to your community and like what you are aligning on, being available, responding to emails, like being able to like, you know, support in that way goes a long, long way.
Yeah. No, yeah, no, for sure. Everybody's trying to get the big dog. It's hard to scale yourself sometimes. So I actually appreciate you calling it out. And so, all right, we talked a lot today, right? And one thing I love is that you have a big goal. You have set a goal of shifting $1 billion in VC to Latina identified, I guess, founders and investors, right? And obviously that is audacious and is a beautiful target. Tell us a little bit about where you are on that journey and what does that path to build $1 billion actually look like?
So that was a goal set up right before this administration, which I think we were on path. We had a couple of tens of thousands, tens of millions that we knew we had already shifted. We were on track. If we continued to expand our programming and build, that would be possible. Right now, it feels like it's even farther away, but just because a lot of our corporate sponsors have pulled out because they don't want to be associated with something that's so, you know, focused on Latina. Also, there is a lot, you know, like a lot of less Latino VCs as well that are pulling out. There's more founders though, and so we have to figure out how are we trying to allocate capital that way, whether it's through partnerships, right? We had Google's Latino Founder Fund, like give, I think 10 of our founders like 100K grants, right? Just through our partnership and through us providing them with the candidates, right? We had a lot of partnerships that would have helped with this number. But now we're raising Familia Fund, which will hopefully allow us to prove a model where we then can bring on more and more millions of dollars to support more founders. And so we're trying this method because, quite frankly, with this current system, we're not getting near there. But with this new pilot, we're going to be able to prove that we can not only have capital preservation, but also increase this capital in a way that makes sense, that's for an endowment type model, and that people can really get behind, and that can also be replicated for other communities. So I can talk more about that, but I feel like that's our big swing right now in this time, is to actually have access to capital and actually be the ones that are deploying it versus just providing through like other partnerships or other things that we were working on.
Yeah. I feel like this administration just wants to get rid of everything good, and if you are listening, I feel like you guys should really be doubling down on initiatives that move our culture and move our society forward. When we win, everybody wins, y'all. When we win, everybody wins.
Absolutely. I mean, like, once again, this comes from a place of economic power. Like, we do also provide a lot of economic power to this country. And so, like, by supporting us, it is very American, right, to do it, right? And so, like, how do you, like, even with that argument, people don't care for it because it's not like top of mind, but it is something where you have to really think about what is the long-term impact if we don't invest in this now. And so always trying to think from, once again, a place of abundance, of just continuing to support those that are actually doing the work.
Yeah, for sure. And keeping things going, right? Because regardless of their support, regardless of people's support, we're still going to be doubling down on our communities. Tell me what you're hoping for the Latina innovation ecosystem 5 years from now, not just in terms of funding numbers, but in culture and belonging, and who gets to have a seat at these tables that are sometimes visible, but also invisible.
I have such big dreams for this community, right? One, that the crabs and barrel mentality goes away completely, right? Because I think that everyone that joins knows that and wants to support each other. So that's number one. Two is that, even though VC and entrepreneurship are both going through fundamental shifts, that there's a whole bunch of more people that are a part of it that want to embrace it and actually, help how we move forward in our future through this tech lens. And then the last piece is that I am really big in empowering people. So whether it was through like the venture program or like, with LaFamilia mentorship, bringing back all of our programming that is all about them supporting each other. We just don't have that right now because of the resources, but we would redo those and make sure that then people come into leadership opportunities and support the next generation. That's all huge that I think could really help people. Right now, the thing that we're doubling down on is our city chapters, because I do believe that every city has a specific mandate or like something that they're working on. And so being hyper local in that way helps with then the founders that are there, the founders, the investors. And so that's where we're making sure that we're doubling down on, because then we want to expand globally. So I think by then being part of the global ecosystem, we're able to then, find and support founders and investors where they are, and really be that first touch point into an ecosystem that is actually, welcoming, with a sense of belonging and trust from the get-go, instead of feeling like you're the only one, instead of feeling like, you don't belong there, that you're invisible, all that. Like, I want to change this so that people are excited to get into this space, that they actually really care, and then they support the people that come behind them.
And for those that are listening today that might be just losing a little bit of faith, right? Because I know for me, like I've been doing my work in social impact and tech education for 12 years now, right? And someone the other day was like, Jessica, like, what keeps you going? You've seen so many like times where you're like sliding up a hill, you're about to get to the mountaintop, but then you're also now in a place where it feels like society is trying to push you backwards. And I'm like, what keeps me going is like the potential for hope. So for those that are listening that might just be losing that spark, like what are your final words for them so that they do keep on the fight and they do keep standing 10 toes on things that are important for us?
It's okay to have a range of emotions. I think you can be on your pity potty and feel down about yourself, but you gotta fall down 7 times, get back up 7 times, and keep going and keep pushing forward because, in some ways, we have it easier than some of our ancestors. Like we've been through so much generationally.
Mhm.
And I think that it is times of chaos where there's times of opportunity. So see this as a positive. And then more specifically, if you can push forward during these times, when things get better, you're going to be set up for success. And that to me is what's kind of keeping me steady because I'm like, okay, if we can get through this, we can get through anything. If I can
Mhm.
get through, like what I've just told you, right? In Harvard or banking, whatever. If I survived that, this is a different challenge, but I'm more prepared and well suited emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually, all that aligned to make the best concerted effort to build this future. And if I can do it with community, with people that support you along the way, like that means the world. So find your tribe, put your head down, pray to God, and just do the work.
And obviously, one thing and this will be my second to last question, but one thing I love about you is that you are fearless. You're a champion, not just for us in tech or in foundership or in VC, but your story is just so beautiful. And it's a testament to someone who continuously bets on themselves, right? So for the young Latina who is in New York City, who's just like, I like finance and I like tech and I want to be a model and I want to do all these things. What would you say to her about the importance of betting on herself and making sure that she is sticking to her passions and not letting society box her in?
Yeah, it's a tough road, but if anybody can do it, a Latina can do it. Like I have no doubt. There will be a lot of haters. There will be a lot of rejection. There will be a lot of folks that are like envidious us or like looking down on you and like trying to put you down. But all you got to do is pray to God, put your head down and do the work. And more than ever with AI and this accessibility piece, like you can figure it out way more than what I did. I feel like I did a lot of mistakes. No, there was no playbook for how you become a model while you're investment banking. There was like I made so many mistakes, but I think people are better suited and they just have to be the ones that actually execute on this advice that's always online, whatever. You just gotta, ponte la pilas and get to work.
Absolutely. Guys, there might not always be a playbook, but that's your call to start one. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Cheryl, thank you so much for your time, your honesty, your fire. Your story is just living proof that a person doesn't need to fit into a certain mold and that you can lift as you climb and that we can be building a future where all of us win. So, for those who are listening and they want to learn more about La Familia and get involved, how can they stay connected with you and the organization?
Yes, LaFamiliaFoundation.com. So you can explore all the different familias, and also there's a volunteer form there if you want to fill it out. And yeah, you can also find me on LinkedIn, Cheryl Campos, or Instagram at cyc.nyc, and La Familia's Instagram of lafamilia.foundation.
Awesome. All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Behind the Work this week. If the episode resonated with you, don't forget to leave a rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, subscribe on YouTube, and follow us on social media. Until next time. Mwah. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Behind the Work. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure that you subscribe to our channel on YouTube. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and follow us on social media. I'm really looking forward to seeing and hearing how this show is leaving an impact